So, I don't know if you saw or not, after the Wanderlust festival in Taupo. Anybody go to that? Or no, not your kind of thing? Or they had,
I went to 1 year before.
year before, okay. They had a famous American yoga teacher. His name is Rod Stryker, and he was flown out to run some classes. And he was interviewed by a lady who wrote for one of the newspapers, and he expressed a good deal of disappointment about the yoga scene as it exists in not just New Zealand, but fundamentally in much of the world. And he stated, and I'll just read his words. He said that yoga as it is currently practiced, that every last shred of spirituality has been pulled out of yoga, making it nothing more than an exercise class. Some people wouldn't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't think he was making the point that that is bad. He said it is now a very intense form of exercise that distracts people from their distractions. Then he went on to say, it has very little to do with what yoga actually is, which is a discipline to give you stillness, to learn to master your mind. It is not actually teaching people to still their minds. The deeper discipline of yoga is only taught by a handful of people worldwide, he stated. I don't know if that's very shocking or disturbing to people or not. But it's a fantastic and complete system of exercise. That's a fact, the practice of Hatha Yoga. But if we limit our interest only to this, then we deprive ourselves of something that is actually our, what's the right word, heritage. What's really something that we deserve, and that is to be able to experience what it is to live in complete harmony, to be free from fear and anxiety, to experience joyfulness. This is really what it's about. Does that sound like something that would be kind of okay, or what? Or it's not of interest? You know, we live our lives as we are sort of like led to live them by the influence of society and friends and different ideas that are promoted at different times. But the vast majority of people, their life is not truly and wonderfully successful. And people usually don't find that out until they begin approaching death. Is this a downer or? We're okay. I mean, you spend a bit of time in an old age home, helping out people, going and visiting. And you see the utter loneliness and the clutching onto straws, the hope that somehow my life meant something. It was of some value somehow or other. And how people actually just really don't want to really consider that very much. We're very busy being distracted. We're very busy pursuing what we think is really in our best interest, and often not achieving the outcomes. In fact, quite often we set out on a course with a desire to attain something, and we discover partway there that we're kind of getting the opposite to what we set out for. It often happens like that. And if not the opposite, at least something that's not as wonderful as we sought. So, the system and process of yoga is meant to help us to actually become successful in this life that is actually very precious and very important. But it is going to require something. You know how they say nothing in life is free? Pretty much the same thing in relation to this. I'm not talking about money, but if you want something of enormous value, you must be prepared to pay some price. It is going to require something of you. It is going to require some form of commitment or seriousness in order to be able to achieve something of enormous value. In life, we often do not exercise sufficient thoughtfulness about our choices, how we make choices, and where we're kind of heading. I sometimes get pulled into marriage counseling. People lean on me. And one of the amazing things you always hear when relationships are not going very well, and somebody will say something, well, if I knew you were like this, I wouldn't have married you, or I wouldn't have lived with you. And it's like, oh my God, why are you saying that now? Don't you know it's your job to find out before you get into something, rather than just plunging headlong into something and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best? That's not a good strategy. It's not a strategy that will lead to actual success. In the yoga system and the yoga process, they teach some really important principles. Some principles that really require us to think in a different way about our life than we've probably been thinking to date. One of the biggest and most shocking things is probably the fact that you don't have to listen to your mind. You don't have to. It's not a requirement. One of the central and important principles within the yoga system was to cultivate through practice through practice. This appreciation of how I am actually not my mind, and I can exercise control of it. I can exercise what gets put into it. I can exercise control of how it's going to work. And I can therefore have a tremendous influence on my life. You know, there's this pervading, I probably don't even sound like a Kiwi to you guys, right? I'm originally from Te Aroa, you know, about 120 k's south. And I left New Zealand when I was about 18, going 19, in the great pursuit for what is the purpose of this life. I grew up in a town with like 3,500 people. And I used to look at my parents and think, my God, I don't want to end up there. There's nothing wrong with them. They're really nice people. But the idea of just finishing school and settling down, getting a job, and marrying someone and having kids and then just growing old and dying, it was like, that was really blowing my mind when I was young. I thought, is that really what this whole thing is about? Is this really what it's for? So I had already taken up the practice of yoga, and that was like, oh my God, it's monumentally difficult trying to find information that we're talking about in the 60s. You know, our library across the street was about as big as this room, and there was nothing available there, and people didn't write books about these kind of things. There was a couple of marginal sort of things floating around. But I eventually discovered about Ashtanga yoga and began trying to develop a personal practice, and quickly became really overwhelmed with the realization that without somebody to actually guide me through this process step by step and to explain to me the things that were going on, that I was experimenting with, and the things that were happening in these practices I was undertaking, it was quite daunting. So I ended up going to Australia, and I met my spiritual teacher and followed him back to India and spent a few years in India, and then have been based mostly in Southeast Asia for about 35 years, and the last 6.5 years in Hawaii before coming back here last November. It's a little introduction. So, you know, I'm trying to look at what's going on around me. I'm watching family members go through all kinds of difficult situations and even misfortunes. I'm looking at relatives and friends and my own life, and I'm looking for some real answers. When I first was introduced to yoga and meditation, it was like, oh my God, this is like, you know, a whole different way of looking at things. And the first and really most fundamental thing that I was able to discover was, and this one, the light really went on, you know, this body that you're wearing around, it's actually not you. You're not a man or a woman or young or old, tall, short, fat, thin. That's not you. That's a vehicle that you are using. And then you discover that most of us are spending our entire life completely absorbed in that idea that this is me, and my quest for happiness, my quest to find love, things that are coming from really deep inside me, I mistakenly think that it is originating from maybe my body or my mind, and I seek to fulfill these needs, the need for happiness, for love, these things, on the level of this body and of my mind. You know, we learn from the time we're young that if you feel an inner disturbance, an emptiness, or a lacking in something, and everybody feels it, or not. Everybody feels it. This is the first principle of advertising. Advertisers know this. They know that everybody is anxious inside, that they're empty, that they're looking for fulfillment, for something, for happiness. And then they come up with all these dumb slogans, you know, like open happiness. I mean, is that ridiculous or not? Maybe I'm not allowed to say that, I don't know. It's just like, you know, these crazy ideas. And it's based on this recognition that everybody suffers from the same experience, the same lacking of something, and looking to fulfill it. And they make this promise, all of these different promises. So another thing I discovered really early on is what we are taught. If we feel some emptiness and we're looking for some answers, we're looking for something, we always look outside. We always look outside of ourselves. We always look for something that we can pull in to fill us up. Whereas the spiritual journey is actually an inward journey. It's a journey to ask, who am I? What are these tremendous urges that I feel, this desire for happiness, this desire to both experience love in being loved and loving? Where does this come from? And why do I assume that I need to be looking outside of myself for something that I can bring close to fill up this emptiness? This central theme to all of the paths of yoga, and there are many paths of yoga, there is a central theme and understanding, is that my mind is something that is actually covering me. It is something that I should use and not be controlled by. This idea is leading, you know, the absence of this idea. Let's go the other way. I was just doing a bit of a speaking tour in Australia, and I was up in Darwin, and a couple that were hosting me, we went to the market one morning. That's always the cool experience up in Darwin, the markets. It's like being in Southeast Asia again. It's quite far out. There was a guy that we met, and he was very apologetic for not coming along the night before. He had promised them he really wanted to come along to the talk that we were doing in the meditation program. And he was very distressed, and he said that, you know, there'd been a big calamity in their school. He was a teacher. And this is March. For the third time this year, a kid had committed suicide. And it was a child from his class, so he was like totally distressed. And we have these statistics that I think New Zealand has got the highest rate of child and teen suicide in the developed world. My wife just showed me that a couple of days ago. And that's actually very, very terrifying. It is very unfortunate. I feel that one of the major contributors is fundamentally social media. When you give people tools that make it so that they can take bad qualities that they may have developed and cultivated and exercise influence in a negative way over others, like bullying, the idea of, there's this big struggle with trying to be perfect. We've got to get over this one really fast. This world in which we live is not perfect. Your body will never be perfect. Even if it was, it'll only be perfect for a very short period of time. The aging process inevitably will make it way less than perfect. Live with it. It's reality. But people want to sort of, project an image of being fulfilled, of being happy. And yet, people that are playing this game, they spend so much time on these wicked little devices, just constantly, just non-stop looking, always looking. Looking for what? What is that we're looking for? And they've got all these studies all around the world, and they have found that there is a direct correlation between the amount of time that you spend on social media and your lack of happiness. Also, envy. The more time that you spend on social media, the more you will experience envy of others, thinking that everybody else has got such a perfect and wonderful life, and my life is such a downer. And so I have to do all of these things all the time. I have to pretend, I have to dress up, I have to do all of these things to try and project this image. We see also that there is a correlation between the amount of time and the dedication to which people so-called pursue happiness in these different ways, social media and trying to keep up with things, and depression. Depression is another thing that is very prevalent. And all of these things have their origin in this lack of appreciation and understanding how this body that I have on is not me. It is a vehicle that I am temporarily inhabiting. It will go through a process of growth and aging and finally death. This mind that I am so absorbed in, I should also come to understand is not really me. It is something that I should be utilizing and not being used by. But in a world that we exist in today, people are constantly bombarded with this singular message that if you have any urge, any desire that manifests in your mind, you must act on it. You must not only act on it, but if you do, you are being free, a liberated soul, and you will actually find happiness by chasing all of these things, where the actual opposite is what is true. We carry over these ideas into relationships. In this world, we have come to put so much expectation on each other. It's like if somebody is not in a relationship or not yet married or whatever they're going to do, they're on the hunt, they're looking for that perfect person, that person they can allow into their world and to open their heart to, where they will find shelter, where they will find fulfillment, where they will find true happiness. Isn't this what's going on? Everybody is looking. There's a big problem though. The big problem is this. When you burden somebody else, or they burden you with this heavy responsibility that you have to be the perfectly lovable person, or they must be the perfectly lovable person. And I invest so much into this, and I put so much on the other person, and they put so much on me, and I put so much on myself, wanting to live up to my part of that bargain. This is simply a formula for a shipwreck. Because the reality is, you cannot fulfill anybody else's desire for love, nor can anybody else perfectly fulfill your need. Am I allowed to say that? You know, I think it's really criminal and sad and unfortunate that people have created this massive fantasy, this idea that you can find a perfect partner, and by perfect partner, meaning somebody that can actually complete me, that can perfectly fulfill me. Anybody here that's like middle age and beyond, and probably most of the people that are much younger, the first time you enter into a situation that's described as love, there is so much exhilaration. The heart is beating fast. There is this excitement. There is this tremendous hope. And where does it go? For everyone, not just you, for everyone. If I knew you were like that, I would never have married you. The answer, of course, is to really find out why we have this need for love, and how we can fulfill this need. Actually, this is intimately tied to the whole process of yoga. This is actually what yoga is all about learning your true spiritual identity, and to establish, to experience this condition of actual spiritual love. what ends up happening when people actually partake, they go on this journey known as the path of yoga. If you find someone that you are, attracted to and you can become committed to, if people are not placing this tremendous burden on each other of you need to be my perfection of love, or I need to be your perfection of love. If we are redirecting as fellow pilgrims on this journey, this spiritual journey, and we are both redirecting that tendency to some greater spiritual experience, then people are capable of actually living together in not just wonderful harmony, but with a deep feeling of happiness and a deep feeling of love and appreciation for each other. But it's really important that we are not focusing our attention on another person and expecting them to make my life perfect. Just as you cannot make their life perfect, they cannot make your life perfect. So I don't know if we've gone too far. I don't know what you expected when you came here today. Is this okay or what? Or not? Huh? Yeah? Your heart is a very precious thing. Your identity as a spiritual being is a very wonderful thing. That can actually never be taken away from you. But if we anchor the idea of who we are simply to this body that we are wearing around, I'm sorry, this is a tremendous formula for unhappiness and a great disaster. So, we're planning to do a whole series of these things. This is more or less a bit of an introduction to where we would like to go with stuff. I feel very fortunate. I wandered away from New Zealand at a very young age, and I feel that I've been very blessed, not because I have any ability or talent, probably quite the opposite, by the tremendous kindness of my teachers who gifted me with wonderful understanding that I could never have come to on my own. And I feel a great obligation to try and share this with people. So we want to start doing a whole series and trying to show you in very practical terms how you can live a true yoga lifestyle, a lifestyle that will bring you to the experience of everything that you are looking for and actually much more. But today, maybe I'll just try to leave you with one or a couple of things to consider. When people become too emotional, and emotion is almost always, from a yoga perspective, considered a negative thing. We're not saying that you become emotionless or cold or anything like that. But when people experience different forms of emotion, whether it's jealousy or envy or anger or great disappointment, these types of things, we tend to become swept away by them. We tend to become consumed by them. And in a highly emotional state, we often say and do things that don't help us and don't help anyone else. And so a really important part of this yoga process is to engage in mindfulness. What is mindfulness? I mean, it's kind of a hot buzzword, isn't it? What is mindfulness?
Awareness.
Huh?
Awareness.
Awareness. The most important thing about mindfulness is to realize that you can actually step back. That in life, when you are becoming overwhelmed with sadness, anger, even extreme happiness, because all of these things are dualities. You're going to experience one, the other will surely follow, just as night follows day and day follows night. You will experience them both. And some people think that's a great thing. You know, that if you didn't have all the sadness, you wouldn't be able to experience the happiness. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. That's not what we are looking for. It is true, but it's not what we are looking for. We are looking for another type of transcendent happiness. Mindfulness means to become actually aware that I don't have to follow this. Right now, I find myself in the middle of a storm. Whether I consider this good or bad, I find myself in the middle of a storm. And I don't have to follow my mind. I don't have to embrace everything that's going on in it as if it is such amazing truth. I don't have to side. You know, there's this amazing thing in one of the great yoga texts known as the Bhagavad Gita. It says, for one whose mind is unbridled, the mind is the greatest enemy. And that's like, what? My own mind can be my greatest enemy? This becomes very evident when somebody falls into a state of depression, where they've pulled their mind in on them and they are just totally living in the world of the mind. When a person becomes overwhelmed with rage or anger, they have completely surrendered to whatever's going on in their mind and they are going with it. And they are physically doing things or verbally saying things that they probably shouldn't and are not going to result in happiness. Why do we do it? Because we have been conditioned to simply follow the mind. And the society in which we live is just like ridiculous. I mean, one of the greatest examples is Nike. What's their logo? They got this little thing. What does it say? Just do it. Well, when I was a kid, that was the Beatles. Why don't we do it in the road? You remember that one? Why don't we do it in the road? It's just kind of like letting everything hang out. Whatever comes to you, to instantly act upon it. The era of instant gratification And gratification is not just good things, it's also the negative things. If you feel a negative emotion, you just let it out. The fact that you're disturbing everybody else is irrelevant because I'm the center of the world, right? It's all about me. And so real mindfulness is when you find that you've lost the plot, when you find that you're losing control, that you're heading in a direction that's not good, that you take a time out. You take a time out. You hit the pause button. You say, sorry, I'm not doing this right now. And you go outside and you walk around, and whether it's counting up to 100, deep breathing, or engaging in some meditation, just like we did earlier and what we'll do in a little while, so that you can get yourself into some state of equilibrium and deal with situations with calmness and with clarity. Mindfulness should help us in our life to seek better outcomes. We don't even ask the question. If I'm going off, if I'm really upset, or I'm losing the plot about something, I don't ask myself, is this actually going to help me get what I want? Is this going to help the situation? Is it really going to help it? I don't even ask that question because I have so much lost control. I have so much given into my mind and been pulled left and right in every whichever way it's going. So one of the things that you can really add to your life is that in these moments, and it should go beyond just the extremes of, it should become more of a regular practice to be able to step back, to be able to step away from confrontation or extreme situations and really think about, is it in my interest to go there? Is it in this other person's interest to go there? And the greatest tool that you can use to help you through these processes, a tool that actually brings about transformation in your life, is the process of meditation. The process of meditation is not just about clearing your mind. That's actually pre-meditation. Or just relaxing, that's pre-meditation. You need to take your mind and submerge it in something that is completely, an experience that is completely spiritual, in transcendence, so that your mind begins to take on the quality of spirituality or transcendence, so that you begin to live differently, you begin to see things differently. These are the possibilities for anyone. You don't have to become a great yoga master. You can be the most ordinary, simple, easygoing, agitated, whatever, the most just spaced out individual, and achieve the actual goal of yoga, of full spiritual realization. So we will be having more classes about these kind of things. I don't want to go on too long today. Was this okay? Was it worth coming along, or anybody? No. Huh?
You're brilliant. You don't need feedback.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate feedback, and it's important. I feel like I have a job to do. My job is to try to both share with you and encourage you, and I don't want you to feel like, oh, it's okay for him. He's gone off to India or whatever and done all this stuff. India's full of 1 billion people, and The vast majority of them don't have their act together at all. It's irrelevant. It's just another place on the planet. But every single one of you are entitled to peace. You are entitled to happiness. You are entitled to love. It is part of your inner spiritual nature. And my job, I guess, if I can call it that, is to try and help people find that for themselves, to uncover that for themselves. Because it is part of who you are, it's not something that you learn. You don't have to be brilliant, you don't have to be strong or powerful or intelligent. This is part of who you are, your inner spiritual nature. And what we need to do is engage in a process and activity that uncovers, that reveals who we really are and what is this deep spiritual experience that we all seek.
Kind of following on from what you were saying, there does seem to be kind of an age group from about, say, maybe in the 20s to like maybe 50s, where people seem to be following work, life patterns, and they feel very stuck in everything they're doing.
Yeah.
You maybe mentioned something that they could do,
Yep.
but they get very angry at you. How do you approach that anger? For example, just one way, my friend tried to get me to watch Game of Thrones. For me, I find it very violent and very gender orientated and stuff, and I tried to just approach this in a nice way. And some of the comments that I got back were incredibly horrible. And just stuff like that, kind of. I work with some hairdressers. I'm vegan. They don't appreciate veganism in any way and can be quite vicious about it. How do you
deal with it?
deal with that?
With kindness.
With kindness.
You know, when, and I don't mean to say this in a derogatory way, if you're walking past a dog and it starts barking at you, do you get angry at the dog? I mean, that would be kind of dumb. Some people would get angry, you know? Like, how dare you? You don't have any right, you're just a dog, you know? And just lose the plot on the dog. But most people realize that it's just an animal and it's reacting instinctively. It's reacting instinctively. It's not like it thinks about it. It's not like it's got a plan to harass you or anything. It's just, it sees you as some kind of threat and it responds in that way. So in a similar manner, when people actually don't have control over their mind, which is the vast majority of human beings, do not have any control over their mind. The things that go on in their mind, that they then become, they're compelled to say whatever's going on in their mind, like it's some sort of sacred temple or something, and anything that's going on in there is true, and it's correct, and it should be followed at all costs, which is far from the truth. So when people are acting in this way, in an unenlightened way, one should feel great sympathy for them because they're stuck in a situation that they can't do anything about, not in their current state. But by your kindness, and you're perhaps trying to make a point once in a while and help people understand something, and to show that in spite of their being horrid to you, you treat them with dignity, it goes a long way, and eventually it breaks people down a little bit and they begin to change. The thing is for you not to allow your mind to take what's happening and turn it into something that it's not. See it for what it is. These people have no control, and feel a little sympathy for the situation and be kind to them. How about that? You're very welcome. You know, being kind and cultivating humility and tolerance. These are virtues that really make it so you grow spiritually. But it's not something that you artificially do. You know, inside you're just like, I hate this person. Yes, you know. You've got to get out of that headspace yourself. You've got to do something about your own situation so that you can actually do something for others. And it's real practical stuff. I mean, the things that we talked about, are they not practical? They're practical, yeah. And by beginning these types of practices and by associating with people that are trying to live this life, who do have a deep and abiding understanding of this type of consciousness and what it is, it rubs off on you. So, you know, the principle of association is important, and being able to hear, and then being able to engage in a practical activity that will be transformative, that opens your mind up and your heart up and changes you. That's what's important. With that, thank you very much. Namaste. Oh.